Good evening, everybody. This is a continued hearing for preliminary subdivision review on the application of the United Church of Underhill for a 9-lot planned residential development located at 422 Vermont Route 15 in Underhill, hereafter referred to as Harvest Crossing. The property is in the Underhill Flats Village Center zoning district, and the proposed use is residential with open land owned in common. The initial preliminary subdivision review hearing was held on Monday, July 1st, 2024. It was continued to Monday, August 5th, 2024, and subsequently continued to this evening's meeting. This application is subject to review under the current regulations to 2011 Town of Underhill Unified Land Use and Development Regulations as they have been amended through March 3rd, 2020, and the 2015 Underhill Road Driveway and Trail Ordinance as amended through December 18th, 2018. The purpose of a preliminary subdivision review hearing is to determine preliminary conformance with the municipal plan and the regulations and ordinance is in effect at the time of the application, identify issues or concerns associated with the proposed subdivision, recommend modifications necessary to achieve conformance, identify any additional information required for a final subdivision review prior to the preparation of final documents. Should additional information be required, the board reserves the option to continue the hearing to a date and time certain for that information to be submitted and reviewed by the board. The members of the Development Review Board who are here tonight, my name is Charlie Van Winkle, I'm the chair. To my right is Penny Miller. To Penny's right is Dan Lee. And to Dan's right is Matt Chapik. We do not have any board members participating online tonight. Are there any members of the public in attendance to comment about the application? And if so, can you please identify yourself, state your address for the record. If your mailing address is different from your physical address, and you want to receive a copy of the decision, we'd like that address as well. Are there any municipal or state representatives present other than the interim zoning administrator and acting in their representative capacities? Okay.
Maureen Collins-Cole, member of the select board, just here to observe and hear how the evening goes.
Okay, well, welcome. So the rules of procedure that the board follows, as well as an interested party information sheet, are available to all attendees for review on the town's website and can also be obtained from the planning and zoning administrator. Only those interested persons who have participated either orally or through written statements in a DRB proceeding may appeal a decision rendered in that proceeding to the Environmental Division of Vermont Superior Court. If you're an applicant, a representative of the applicant, or an interested party who wishes to participate in the hearing tonight, we ask that you clearly state your name prior to speaking. What I want to do now is swear in all those present who wish to speak regarding the application. All individuals in person and online who plan to testify must take the following oath by responding, "I do" at the end. And it's a pretty simple oath. It's, do you hereby swear that the evidence you give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? Anybody online saying "I do"? Okay, none. Are there any conflicts of interest, or have there been any ex parte communications on any part of the board members? Okay. In regards to tonight's hearing process and to alleviate interruptions and allow for an efficient meeting, the board will hear from the parties in the following order. So first we'll hear from the applicant or their representatives. We'll hear from the interim planning and zoning administrator, Brad Holden. We'll hear from members of the public who are present in the room, and then we'll transition to members of the public who wish to participate remotely. Anyone who wants to speak tonight will be recognized. We'd ask that you direct your comments to the board and not to other representatives in the room. The applicant or his representative will have an opportunity to redirect. And then final comments will be solicited from the planning and zoning administrator as well as other members of the public. Members of the board will have an opportunity to ask final questions or make any final comments. As I said before, all speakers should address their comments to the board and not to other parties present at the hearing. Members of the public are afforded 5 minutes unless requested, and consent by a majority of the board to exceed that time to discuss the application. And the board may ask questions to anyone in attendance regarding the application. So at this point in time, the materials that were submitted to the planning and zoning administrator since the previous August 5th hearing on this application will be entered into the record, and that includes Exhibit D, Revision 1. It's a preliminary plan application letter and narrative from McCain Consulting dated August 19th, 2024. Exhibit H, Rev 1, which are plans and details from McCain Consulting dated August 14th, 2024. Exhibit I, which is a stormwater analysis from McCain Consulting dated August 19th, 2024. Exhibit W, a letter from Alan Morse dated August 5th, 2024. All of these exhibits, along with materials previously submitted in support of the application, are available in the Harvest Crossing review file, DRB 23-09, VT 422 at the Underhill Planning and Zoning Office. And they're also they're also available on the town website. So that's the preamble. I think I've covered everything. So George, I think you're up. What I'd like you to do, if you could summarize the overview, and then we can get into the specifics. Back up. So we do general public comment and then public comment regarding the application?
Always, at every meeting, there's always a general
Public comment.
open and public
Yeah, we usually do that before we start talking.
comment. I know, but usually open the meeting, ask for public comment.
Does anyone like to comment
On something
on
other than
something other than this application? I thought we had that covered, but okay. So George, what I'd like you to do is just summarize the application for those of us who have amnesia and can't remember back to July 1. We had some technical concerns regarding stormwater runoff, the amount of water that's present on the site. We engaged the services of a consultant to discuss the management options, and then you had an opportunity to respond to those concerns our consultant raised.
Yes.
Right, so, start high level, we'll get there as things go on.
Perfect. So stormwater design is just a pre-treatment swale to a level spreader device.
So George, before you get into that, we're here to review the application. You're proposing 9 units, all right, municipal water, on-site septic, blah, blah, that kind of stuff. So,
Do we start there?
yeah. Yeah, no. We have new folks in the audience.
Gotcha. So yeah, so the project is a proposed planned unit development. We've got 7 residential lots with 8 living units served by on-site wastewater and municipal water supply. They'll be served by a shared access road through the middle of the property on the northern side via Vermont Route 15. There will be an open land lot, we've denoted as Lot 8, which will be common space for the subdivision, and then a lot of about 1.6 acres that will be conveyed to the church as part of the overall development plan. Okay, now we'll get into stormwater. So yes, we had a chance to review the analysis that the town had performed on that design. We did tweak our hydrologic model and subsequently have kind of changed track for stormwater management. So Way and 3 to a that, but we've got a retention structure of a large will stormwater runoff.
I see you guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Aaron. I don't know what happened. Catastrophic failure. Um, We're going to continue. It sounds like we're recording, so here we go.
Okay. There we go.
So we're into the nitty gritty about stormwater.
Yes. So we changed our stormwater management attack. We're now proposing a stormwater detention structure, which is this rectangle you can see in the screen now. So that will be a large hollow depression with a fixed outlet to release stormwater over time, ensuring that during both the 10-year and 25-year storm event, the current runoff rates do not exceed what is existing on the site today. There are two options for this detention structure, pending getting out to the site with a small excavator to do a soil test pit. If the soils are consistent with what we found for the in-ground wastewater systems, we're going to set this up as an infiltration basin, so it will promote infiltration into the ground and disposal within the water table. If the soils will not support that, then it's going to be a kind of a dry detention pond, oversized 4-bay that will then outlet to a similar level spreader device that we had previously proposed, which is this hatched area here. 4-bay. So that's an area for sediments and silts and whatnot to settle out from when you get the real murky stormwater, or it's got the kind of the first flush of stuff off driveways and parking areas.
But you gave two options. Would they both be the size that you're showing here?
They would, yes. In the case of the infiltration basin, we would still need a 4-bay, but it would be much smaller. So we'd have this side of the structure on the left of these dashed lines would be our 4-bay. And then this side of the structure would be our infiltration basin. There's a chance that it gets smaller, but I wanted to make it as, it won't be any bigger than what's shown on the plan. Because if the size of this second chamber will depend on the hydraulic conductivity of the soils that we're trying to infiltrate into. So if we have nice gravelly soils, there's a chance that could get smaller. But it doesn't really reflect on that. Yeah, so either of those options that we're proposing are permissible under the Vermont Stormwater Management Rule, and we will be required to obtain coverage under that permit through the state of Vermont. So the final details will be approved by the state and adhere to that design manual and those regulations, whether it's an oversized 4-bay detention basin or an infiltration basin. And that was the biggest change. We had another sheet here. The stormwater consultant had requested confirmation of the 702 contour elevation because we had discussed that the open space wetland meadow is a low point. So we added spot elevations to the plan from our on-site topographic mapping to show that 702 contour we're showing was correct. We've got a low point here at about 701.4, 701.5, and then we start to work our way back uphill as we move to the south, back until we get to the 702 contour just by the property line. And then I think there were a couple other miscellaneous comments on some other infrastructure that was not stormwater related.
Could you go back to the, I guess, be the south side of that field there, where it looks like
Yep.
that 702 contour comes together? Right there where your
Right there.
cursor is. Where's the water going from there?
This is a low point, so this is a collection area.
Yeah. So is it ever getting in that ditch?
On the uphill side, no.
No. So where's it
No.
going? Like, that's the low point. Where's it go from there?
Yeah, I don't think there's anywhere for it to. I mean, on a larger storm, it may.
But like
Yeah.
when the ground is frozen and it's covered with snow, we get that rainfall. We've got a lot of participation, I'll call it.
Mhm.
Water, stormwater runoff, snow melt runoff in this, sorry about that, in this pond or in this field, to the point where people have submitted pictures of, it looks like a pond. So where does, right now, you're saying everything's going to get directed in the ground and nothing's leaving the site?
Correct. Yeah, that's why those photos exist, because this is the low point and creating a ponding area. So we're trying to manage that as well with elevating the houses to the north.
Yeah.
Because there's the stormwater swale up above, but we're not conveying any stormwater runoff into that swale. So
if I'm looking at your pre and your post development calculations, right, there's not a lot of difference between pre and post. You changed the hydrologic soil group to D.
We did.
right? Which should help you in your runoff.
Well, that creates more runoff.
Creates more runoff, but you start with more runoff because you're at hydrologic soil
Correct,
D.
yep.
So you have to attenuate a little bit smaller volume.
Correct.
So, but you've got a 25-year runoff at up 1.08 CFS, right?
Yes, from the area, the contributing area that we're,
So it's not,
from the new impervious that we're creating.
yeah, so it's not a lot of runoff and it's not a huge rate of
Correct.
runoff.
Yeah,
It's just,
it's just flat, so
it's
it doesn't
flat,
move
so,
very
yeah,
fast.
yeah, okay.
Well, if Charlie's asking about that, I have a question. I don't, oh, sorry. This is Penny Miller. If Charlie's going into the calculations, I have a question that I don't really want to know the details. I just want to know from you whether I need to be concerned about it or not. So I saw in, you're civil. I saw in the previous package, I don't understand this and it's okay that I don't, that you had highlighted summary for pond 9P wetland meadow. You had outflow highlighted and it has 0 across it. And you had a arrow that said during the 10-year storm, no storm water leaves the project site. But when I look at these calculations in the new package, which I don't really understand, I never see outflow with 0 all the way across. So does that mean that outflow, that stormwater does leave the project site?
Well, no, it's a slightly different analysis.
Microphone?
Don't need to,
Just
sorry.
leave them on. Just everybody.
So yes, it was a slightly different analysis. So the one where we had zeros across the board was looking at the uphill development that had previously permitted because we knew that the stormwater swale that runs along Harvest Run was of particular interest. And we were showing that we weren't contributing any runoff there before we had a detention structure proposed. So we weren't, our flow rates were low enough when we had the glitch in the model in the first round that we didn't need to provide that detention structure. So now that we've provided the detention structure, the modeling I provided was for the new impervious we're creating to show that the runoff is less in the post-development condition than it is in the existing condition. And it shows the same thing, it's just a different way of presenting it.
That makes sense to you, Charlie?
Yeah.
All right, okay, thank you.
So the other stuff our consultant came up with.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So yes, they had some additional comments on utilities. So there was a comment on the diameter of the force main. So we increased the diameter of, I'm sorry, not the force main, the water main. We increased the diameter of the water main to be an 8-inch line. We had additionally relocated the force main serving one of the duplexes on lot 3 to the right because we had inadvertently had it too close to the final hydrant that was at the end of the water main. So we moved that line over here to the right where we've got our minimum 10-foot separation to the fire hydrant. And then they had noted, just to confirm, that as we have multiple force mains crossing in the vicinity of this culvert here, to ensure that we've got adequate insulation and burial depth for those force mains to make sure we don't have any freezing issues over the core lifespan of the project. So we confirmed that that would be inspected as part of the inspection condition that will be in the state permit, and that we've got the details there that show what that insulation should look like and what the burial depth should be.
So George, quick question on the detail of your pond. See the 2 dashed lines that are in the middle of the pond there? What is that?
So that is, it's because we still have to do the soil test pit to see if we can create an infiltration basin.
Yeah.
If we can do an infiltration basin on this side, due to the amount of water that will be infiltrating, we need to provide either 50 or 75% of what they call the water quality volume in a pretreatment forebay. So if it's an infiltration basin, we won't need as much of the structure because more of it will be infiltrating instead of just detaining and spilling out. So this half of the structure will become the forebay for the infiltration basin. Whereas if we can't infiltrate soils, that dashed line goes away and this entire thing becomes an oversized forebay detention pond.
Okay. And then on this plan set, there's a set of catch basins on either side of Route 15 going in.
Correct.
Where do they connect to?
I believe those are part of the VTrans system because Underhill doesn't have an MS4 permit.
Yeah.
So I think they're just to convey water under Route 15 and out to the river. So they don't provide any treatment or detention, and unfortunately we couldn't tie into them.
I mean, that would solve a lot of hydraulic problems
A ton of them.
if you could connect into that.
Yep.
Because that's the big issue a lot of the neighbors are concerned with.
Yes.
So,
But yeah, that's a state infrastructure for Route 15, and Underhill doesn't have a stormwater treatment area or overall permit that I'm aware of.
you can't sell them on that?
I've never asked, but
I mean, there's a lot of overland flow through vegetated terrain before anything would get in there.
yeah. Well, yeah, unfortunately, where those are,
It's a lot
overland
higher.
flow
I
isn't
get it.
going to work because we only have a 60-foot strip for
Yeah.
the minimum right-of-way width going up. So, and then we're also, I believe this is at the, of course the numbers, but we're several feet lower going into the property than we are along Route 15 here. It drops down. So we don't want to get into a situation where we have to pump stormwater anywhere.
I just chime in and hopes you guys get that infiltration program going. I know the expanded forebay oftentimes just gets silted in and then just kind of holds water. Just close to the site at the Jericho Market, they have one on the far side of the parking lot, and just full of water all the time because it
Yep.
can't infiltrate anymore. It just has been silted in.
Gotcha. Yeah. This
And I
will
think
be,
those infiltration basins do a lot better job at being
Yep.
able to be maintained to continue being.
yes. And yeah, there will be, as part of the state permitting requirements, there will be annual inspections that are required to take place of this infrastructure. So someone will have to do an inspection of this every year to make sure that situation isn't happening. And then every 5 years, a professional engineer needs to go out and actually look at it so that a person with some technical expertise can confirm that everything is operating per the intended design.
George, this is Penny. So what happens what sort of enforcement happens in your experience if that doesn't occur? Is
The
there
annual
an,
inspections don't occur?
yes,
It's a sliding scale and a lot of it depends on the landowners, but they do have the ability to issue what's called a notice of alleged violation, where they can say, you haven't been submitting your annual reports or you haven't renewed your permit, so you're going to be, you're in violation of that, and that's a title flaw in every property within the subdivision. So a lot of times those get flagged, even if the state doesn't trigger an NOAV, if those inspections haven't been performed or the permit doesn't get renewed. Whenever one of these pieces of land goes to be conveyed, the lawyers pick it up most of the time.
okay. Have we had any comments on McCain's solutions by the folks, Civil Engineering Associates? Have they seen George's Solutions, and have they commented on it at all yet? Or has that been sent to them?
It's been sent to them, yes. And of course, we just got it late Wednesday night, so we've had Thursday and Friday to look at it. I did get some preliminary feedback, just preliminary from them, that Charlie has here that points out a few things. But I don't think they've had, I guess they are waiting for feedback from the board to see how far you wanted them to dive in.
Is it time for more board questions?
Yeah, keep asking.
All right, if you don't mind. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to everyone for coming and everyone online for coming. I know that these meetings can be very tedious and they can be stressful, DRB meetings. For us also, we don't have time to collaborate, and we're not allowed to collaborate on a project outside of the meeting. So we're sitting here thinking through things in real time while we're seeing them. And we appreciate your patience. I think that our looking into the details very carefully should not be a reflection on how we individually feel about this project. I suspect we all are very excited about this project, but we just need to make sure as a DRB that it follows our regulations. And part of our regulations involve not negatively impacting other properties and not negatively impacting its own project. So we are delving into this carefully because water is an issue. Water has been an issue on other subdivisions, and water obviously is an issue here. So thank you for your patience. I also wanted to bring up one other idea that I had, but I don't actually know if it's appropriate or allowed. So I'm going to bring it up to our chairperson and let you tell me whether I'm overstepping or not.
Go ahead.
You can strike it from the record if it needs to be. Okay. So just as a little background, coincidentally, about a month ago, two things happened that gave me another angle at looking at land. One was that we had a hostage release, a hostage swap it ended up being. And I remember hearing the Secretary of State say that they weren't getting anywhere with proceeding on it until they actually thought to make the problem larger, to enlarge the problem, to then create the best solution. Coincidentally, I also attended a rural Vermont community conference around that time. And I don't know that the conference was intended to focus on water, but because we had just had flooding in Vermont, a number of the speakers in the workshops talked about how maybe we need to expand how we view things in Vermont and think more regionally, think beyond political boundaries, because water doesn't know boundaries. Rivers don't know boundaries. They don't stop at a town line. So reflecting on that idea of regionalism, of looking beyond a boundary, when looking at this project, and I suspect it may be that what I'm saying is not will not be welcome because it may involve more time and more energy and more funds. That an analysis by our the technical review we requested said that the 702 elevation is both on this property and flows south onto other properties. And we know we have water in basements in this area. We've had testimony from neighbors talking about their water problems. I've been on this property in the winter when there have been thaws and skating rinks across the property, not able to infiltrate. And I've also been in town 40 years and seen the Roaring Brook run its jump its banks and start filling in this property and others. And so I wonder if we should consider the select board, the planning commission, the DRB. I don't know what board would want to move in this direction, but consider this property as possibly a solution to some of the water problem, instead of, one, exacerbating it, which the neighbors are concerned about, or two, trying to keep its own water within its boundaries. Could it actually be some sort of a remediation, even if not total, a partial remediation for water and climate change that's causing more water events to be treated on this property?
Is there a question there?
Can I bring up this idea? Which I just did. I don't even know who it would be directed to.
What are you asking? I mean, right now, it seems like you're moving the goalposts on the applicant,
Yes.
in my opinion.
Yes, and who would end up agreeing to that goalpost moving or not? Would it be that the select board might say to the, I mean, this is a unique property, that it is a low-lying property, virtually our only open property that I know of in Underhill Flats. Could it be part of a solution for a water problem, and who would broach that topic? Would it be the select board going to the applicant and saying, we'd like to work with you, we have funding, could we get some engineering and see how this could work to help some properties in the area? Or do we just look at this in isolation because that's all we, the DRB, are tasked with and all the applicant asks?
We were looking at the property in a holistic way right now. We've asked the engineer to do a pre-development runoff analysis, manage the stormwater. We've said stormwater every hearing since sketch plan.
We have relative to this property. I believe I don't know that I can read it correctly, but I believe Civil Engineering Associates was indicating that looking at this 702 contour, which ends up going down Depot, down Park Street and encompassing even the post office, I believe they're suggesting that maybe that all should be looked at relative to this property, but maybe they're not. I mean, when would we ever, what would ever be the venue or the opportunity? How would it ever be thought of to do more than just stay within a project's boundaries?
Well, you just heard the applicant's consultant say that the 702 contour closes on the property and it creates a low spot right there.
Yes.
Right. And then no water from the project's going to leave the property.
It's not what I see here,
right,
though.
So either you believe them or you don't. If you don't believe them, we deny the application, they go away, come back with a different plan.
So if I can clarify CEA's report on that, the 702 contour that they had in their analysis was based on state-provided LiDAR information, where they've flown the entire state to get surface elevations of every town and forest and mountain and whatnot. So my interpretation of their response was to provide some additional information to confirm that our 702 contour was accurate instead of the LiDAR contour that was shown in the state-provided information. So
okay, so you think this is inaccurate, is what you're saying, George?
But I think the 702 contour certainly exists over in that portion as well, but it's not a continuous line.
But it's not contiguous to this property's 702,
it
is what you're
closes out
saying?
in this, so we've got a bit of a bowl, and then it goes up to 702, and then it'll go down to 701 and back up to, so it exists, but in order to, we obviously can't go map people's properties that aren't within our property lines for what we're doing here. And so we just wanted to clarify that the 702 contour that was shown on our plan based on the site-specific mapping was accurate in its depiction. Because in the original plan, we had not proposed any detention. We were using the wetland meadow as kind of a holding basin. So CEA wanted to make sure that it was indeed a hollow point or a low point. In the new design, we're providing retention anyway, so our pre and post development flows are consistent. But we still provided that information just to make sure that we had addressed all of CEA's comments.
I have a question that I think is somewhat related to what Penny is saying. For instance, the stormwater retention pond, I'll call it, we're taking care of the water on this property, but is there any reason why that couldn't be made bigger and deeper, that it would in fact lessen the impact of stormwater as it flows down? Would that make a difference in terms of storing water?
Deeper would be an issue for this one if we aren't able to infiltrate soils, because we've got it shallow now, given that there's nowhere to provide an underdrain. So it's going to be a kind of a shallow collection area and then disperse slowly. We can't really make it deeper because we don't have anywhere to daylight. If we go down further, we don't have anywhere to daylight a drain. So we've got to keep it relatively shallow. Bigger would be possible. There are some conflicts with the wetlands and wetland buffers that would potentially be difficult to expand that much more than it is now. I know certainly the class 3 wetlands do not have a buffer at the state level, so that is okay at the state, but I believe the town regulations do require that 25-foot buffer, so we'd be in conflict with some of the town regs there if we were expanding the stormwater pond into those 25-foot buffer areas that are hatched in blue. And then certainly within the class 2 wetland that runs along the ditch, we probably couldn't do anything up there, but that's all uphill of where we're proposing to do stuff anyway.
Well, even deeper though, at least you're retaining the water, right? I mean, you're not waiting it to settle down any deeper, but you're holding it there. You have an overflow at the same elevation, so it would just essentially be a pond a lot of the time, I guess.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it could be a wet pond, but then you
don't get any storage.
You're not getting the storage if it's full of water all the time. So we plan for it to kind of slowly drain down over time versus collect with water and be permanently full, which would be the issue if it goes deeper and can't infiltrate.
Well, I was just looking at this letter from, it's Rita Walsh, and she's at Ford Depot. I'm not sure on this, if that's what's showing up as Matthew and Jacqueline Gombrich.
No, I think it's the next one over, Matt.
So in this December storm, and the pictures we have, she's standing up to her knee in that water. So whatever elevation she's at there, it's 1.5 feet deeper or higher than that elevation. So, I mean, that water is coming from, I mean, it's just one big body of water that goes up into this site as well as other properties. So.
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen that picture you're referring to.
I think it was just, that was the picture. Mm.
You don't have a copy of it?
I don't have a hard copy, but which exhibit was that in?
I don't know if I have a copy of it
That
either.
was me. I might be able to give it to you.
I got a copy of it. How do I get a copy of it if you don't have a
Okay,
copy?
yeah, so it must be in the exhibits.
Ours is the letter from Rita, and then the pictures are.
The pictures came late, remember? I think we entered them into the, didn't we, into the,
It's there with a letter from 8 neighbors, Alan Morse.
Is that exhibit V?
you know, is that?
We can
That's
email it
Alan
to-
Morse, but the photos were back on the first, I think the first hearing. If you went to that on the calendar, it was the last.
Just go back, then go up top there.
July 1.
I mean, the pictures are definitely showing a large body of water that encompasses this site as well as all the way down along Harvest Run, because I know these houses that are shown across from on Harvest Run.
And I think the 702 contour goes through their yards, like slices through their yards when I was looking close, when I was zooming in closely.
So anyway, I was looking at the property right south of this, the Gombrich. They're on Depot as well, and looks like they're in the 702, 703 contour for that property.
Yeah, that's it there. Yeah, these are not, just for the record, these are not from Walsh. These are from the Meadow Lane folks, Alan Morris.
Okay.
So just to be clear, Walsh did not submit any photos,
Okay.
just the one letter as the
But a letter.
exhibit shows.
Right.
So I thought that was the case.
Okay.
Correct.
Yes.
They are.
Yes, thank you. George, is it not possible, since the state does not regulate class 3 wetlands, to make a class 3 wetland into a class 2 wetland? Is that something that one doesn't do, or?
It would depend on the amount of disturbance that would be being proposed and if the town regulations would allow for it. At the state level, it's correct, they do not regulate class 3 wetlands. At the federal level for the Army Corps of Engineers, they don't have wetland classes, a wetland is a wetland. So I believe there's a certain limitation on area that I believe is 5,000 square feet for disturbance to those areas before it gets uneconomical, because you've got to pay a mitigation fee of like $180,000 an acre. So even 1,000 square feet gets pretty expensive. So depending on the size and scale of what we were proposing and what the town regs would allow for, there may be a way to do that. But my reading of the regulations was we had to respect those wetlands and the buffers. So we were making sure to keep all earthwork or any kind of disturbance out of those buffers and wetland zones.
Anything else you'd like to bring to our attention?
I believe I did change a couple things more administratively that we had discussed at the last hearing. So there was the kind of project summary that addressed all the town standards, where we had a few references to those wetlands and to some adjacent farmlands. So we updated that exhibit as well with the comments that we had during that prior hearing. And other than that, it was, most of the updates were stormwater related.
Okay. So we'll turn it over to Brad for any input to bring our attention to.
Sure. Just to clarify the class 3 wetland buffer. So while the state doesn't have a wetland buffer on class 3 wetlands, Underhill does, 25 feet. Although, however, 50% of that can be impacted under a conditional use review. And this board has done that before. So keep that in mind, that you could gain an extra 12.5 feet in those areas of buffer if you chose to. Could you pan over to get, I'm just gonna go like this, just pan the main subdivision to the middle of the map.
Sorry, you zoomed in, so my screen isn't the same.
Yeah, sorry.
Is that right there?
Yeah, maybe let me zoom out just one hair more. Okay. Can you just hold on to that and then go over to that photo, the photos that we were just looking at a minute ago. Yeah, right there. And I want to just pan that down a little bit. Just bring this one down. Sorry. Yeah, right there. I'm just going to zoom in. And then I can control it, I guess. Does that look right? So we talk about stormwater, but then there's also, flood inundation. So this water, and Meadow Lane folks could correct me if I'm wrong, most likely came from the Roaring Brook or some inundation from the Roaring Brook. And there's just a spot on the Roaring Brook near a property that we're trying to do a FEMA buyout on, where it's just a subtle little swale. And when the water just starts to lap up on that bank and it relieves out of that swale, it just comes flowing in here. And it has for, people say, oh, the Barrett Lane culvert, was a major cause of that. But I have clear proof in 1940 photographs of this area flooding before. So I'm not blaming it on the Barrett Lane culvert. I'm just saying it's always happened. And if you even look back in the deeds, when the Dumas property was a school, there's talk about flooding in those days, back in the 19th century. What concerns me, I guess, just as, and I'm no stormwater expert or no floodplain expert, although I have dealt my whole career with floodplain. But you see to the right of the photo, there's all this high ground. And to the left of the photo, you can see the edge of the tree line here. Basically, that's where the railroad once ran until 1938 when it was abandoned. But those units on the west side of the development road would be placed in this kind of corridor. And this is why CEA thought the 702 contour was so important, because you're basically you're almost seeing it here, but a little bit higher.
So could you just explain to me where we're standing? So where we're looking?
Yep.
Are we looking north?
I'm gonna use my little pointer. So we are looking north.
Okay.
At Meadow Lane. The property's on Meadow Lane, and then the road goes up, towards Sugar Hill.
Okay.
Where's the fire station right now?
The fire station would be over here in these trees, or over here where my cursor is the fire station. This is the Clark property.
All right. And that's the railroad bed on the left side.
This is the railroad bed right here along the edge of the woods. But this, you see the 4 units that are depicted on the east side of the development road all sit on this high ground here, right? So this is just a thought of mine if we wanted to go back to the subdivision plan and just zoom. I'm going to zoom out just a hair here and control it, I guess. So this, even though there's class 3 and class 2 wetlands on this site has been mowed and maintained. The site can continue to be mowed and maintained, if I'm correct, with the wetland rules. It can still continue its use. So this is just a thought, but I'm concerned about the houses that are on the west side of the road. If you look at where that flood inundation area is, how about this whole thing gets shifted to the east, right? And push these. There's nothing to say that these folks' backyard couldn't be in that class 2 wetland buffer. It's all lawn to begin with, right? So try to push these houses up onto the higher ground, if possible, and then maintain a corridor about the same width as your detention pond on the west side of the boundary. So this way you have a clear swath where water could still not be obstructed and could continue to flow through into the field. So that's just a thought that has been running through my mind.
Can you give us an estimate on this drawing where you think those photos were taken?
Yeah, so if I were going to guess.
I know you didn't take the photo, right?
No, but I've been there in it when I've seen it in that state. I'd say the edge of the, let's see, so this is 702, 3, 4. That water's probably sitting on 704.5 maybe.
So you did that before pretty good. You went, flip back to the photo,
Yeah.
right? And
So
so
here we
that
are.
photo on the left there with that photo there, where do you think that vantage point is taken from?
So those trees to the right of the cursor,
Yeah.
that's that wetland that comes off of that little treed area that comes off of the blue line ditch.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, the drainage ditch is on the other side of that.
Of the high spot.
On the wrong
Yeah.
side of it or something. Something's on the wrong.
So this is what you're seeing down here is not what I'm pointing to. The properties would be more, farther out on the photo.
Dan, could you help us?
Yeah, I look at these photos kind of carefully. I think if you go back to the other site map, and now zoom back out. Now move over to the right. I suspect, keep going further to the right. There you go. I suspect that photo was taken down near the lower right-hand corner of this image. Further down and further to the right than the cursor.
Go back to the
I
photo.
think my guess is it was probably, somewhere over in this area is where I think the vantage point, just to answer your question about where
Okay.
that likely.
I just want to respond to that.
Well, if you know, sure. Is it your photo?
Yes.
Oh, it's your photo. Okay.
We want to go behind the church. Oh, sorry, that's too much. Read about here, right then. What did you say? I'm sorry, because the church this is the church property right here, right?
Yeah.
Right here. And that's the path to the church where you walk in for the harvest market. It's right about here. Am I correct?
Yes, the pictures are taken from directly behind the church. Can you go back to the picture?
If you go back to the photo, you can see like,
The one on the right, the water is overtopping the ditch. That is Harvest Run.
this is
The
looking
water
across.
is overtopping that ditch and flowing into the field. So that field is then filling up and it's making its way all the way back to the beginning of the Underhill Garage junkyard, which will overtop and inundate this retention pond that we see on the sketches.
But my point for here is I understand that's Harvest Run. You can clearly see the house there. My point is I'm trying to point out the high ground against the ditch on the east line, right? Are we all in agreement where that green grass is that's where the ditch is, right? We're all in agreement with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, I'm pointing at this white line right here, and there's a tree line, that's the ditch, correct? Okay, so what I'm pointing out is this high ground that's not underwater, okay? And then down here, where the railroad bed is, right, where the houses are being, and maybe they're down in that green, they could be above grade. If I were to zoom in more, perhaps they're in here. But I guess my point being is the water must follow this general path, right? So it seems logical to try and shift the subdivision to the east to get on the high ground. But that's all I really have to say. And I think back to the 702 contour again, I think a few more shots. I understand that you're not allowed to go on people's property for non-boundary related things. But I still think a few more shots to kind of prove out how that 702 contour rounds out might be a good idea. And then just a quick comment on the storm catch basins down on Route 15. We wanted to pop that back up on the screen. Thank you. So yeah, it'd be great if we could get rid of all the stormwater through Route 15 drainage, but I can tell you, I've been in each one of these catch basins and the pipe is very small and it heads south all the way down past the old foam building, and then it crosses down there. So we're not gonna, this storm system isn't capable of handling any kind of storm water except for what's coming off the sidewalk and Route 15. So.
So can you go back to the photos for me, one of you guys? And then looking at the house, the brown house photo. So if I, can I interpret this correctly? Is that water in Harvest Run, or is that dirt, or are these your photos? Is this your photo?
Come up.
Are these your photos?
Yeah.
Yes, they're my photos.
So, are you Alan?
Alan.
Okay. Is that water coming out of the ditch into the field?
Yes, the ditch which drains Upper Meadow Lane, Sugar Hill
Yeah.
is what we're looking at there. And when water comes down to the post office, it's so flat it has nowhere to go, so it overtops the ditch, floods those people's basements right there next to the post office, and runs into the field, which we see on the left-hand side. So if the retention pond, in my view, is designed to retain the water from Lower Meadow Lane, that's well and good, but this water is going to inundate that retention pond, because you can see in the picture that it's already more than what the retention pond probably will be. And it's all because the water has no place to go, so it has to back up somewhere, and it backs up here.
So Alan, the water is coming toward us?
That water,
right now?
yes, that's coming,
That's the rickety house right there. You can
Right.
see where it is.
Turn that mic on, please. Turn that mic on, the other one.
And
Point it.
this is the ditch, and it's coming over the ditch because it's all full down here. It's even across the entrance road into Harvest Run. So this is running into the field, which is causing this. And then that will preclude any water from running down through the field, which is how these people here in the front row get drainage from around Lower Meadow Lane.
Of course, this was a snow event, right? Ground was frozen. There's probably ice in the ditch.
And
So,
it warmed up and there was rain.
yeah.
Yeah.
That never happens in Vermont.
Right, we never get. Let me just see if there's any more. There's the ditch on, I guess if I could just keep going for a quick second. So this ditch in 2011, you see this is the head wall of the 36-inch plastic pipe. So in 2011, we got a supercharge of water. There's some folks from Meadow Lane here that remember me running around. And that culvert, the water got underneath that culvert and it popped right out of the ground. The whole culvert just stayed connected, popped right out of the ground for probably 300 feet maybe, and then stopped at the first entrance to the cemetery. So to fix this, we redug this ditch. We tried to get the pipe, more cover onto the pipe, but we redug this ditch. I shot the grades personally, got it as low and flat as possible in order to get the culvert as low as possible. And then we poured this thick head wall. So hopefully that won't happen again. But it should be noted that the ditches haven't been maintained around Harvest Run or along any of the properties for quite some time. And that could make a big difference. But I think, you know, if we keep getting more extreme weather events, this infrastructure is gonna have to be upgraded at some time. And I don't know what that would look like, but
Brad, where is that exactly?
this is in front of the post office.
So the cemetery is to the right.
The entrance is beyond
Street.
that.
This is
pole.
pavement.
Park Street and the phone company building's right across here. This is Harvest Run. And that's where the culvert, this is open ditch and then that opens into the culvert.
And is that Roaring Brook on the left?
No, Roaring Brook's way over half a mile up the road. Let me just see here.
What's
if
on the
I've got
left
any.
of that
That's
photo?
it.
That
Yeah,
culvert?
there's more. Is there more photos there? Am I seeing them all?
You're scrolling on my screen.
Okay.
What-
All right, go ahead.
Brad, that black corrugated culvert, where's that?
That's the outlet, I think, to, that's the outlet across from River Road, right?
No.
Okay.
Can I comment again also?
Go up to the, could you go up so you're heard on the mic, Alan? Or just come here, whichever you choose.
Up along Park Street here, there are a bunch of catch basins and DIs, whichever you wish to call them. So it's collecting all the water from the park down the street, and it crosses the road here and empties into this ditch, just on the other side of the post office or Harvest Run Road, so which is adding to the flooding for this spot right here, which is impeding this water from getting out of town, so to speak.
Are you good?
I think I'm good.
So what we're going to do now is we already kind of drifted into public comment period, but we're going to formalize it. If you care to add any testimony, we'd ask that you come take that chair at the end. Make sure you're speaking to the mic. We need your name, physical address, and mailing address, and we're here to hear it.
Could I jump in with a clarifying question?
Sure.
That, the stormwater infrastructure that's being proposed for the project is for a 10-year storm? Is that
25.
25-year storm? Do you recall what that 2011 was imagined as?
That was a severe event. That's the event that took out the house on Silly Hill.
Right.
I think that was
Beaver
100 year, wasn't it?
Well, Beaver Ponds played a major role in that event. It was in May. This one, yeah, it was in around Memorial Day, if I remember right. I get confused. There was a 13 and 11 event. So the 11 event may have happened in the spring. I can't, they all blend together, but
Okay. Yeah,
Beaver
no.
Ponds played a big role because
Yeah.
Beaver Ponds were full. They let loose and supercharged the Roaring Brook.
That looks like.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, sure.
So in that photo, it shows water that looks like going back to pretty much where these proposed buildings are. At least the ones to the south. Is that right? So, if that area is somewhat filled or raised, that is further displacing some of this sort of storage. This water. Seems.
Right.
But we'll also be cutting some down to provide positive drainage through, so there's cuts and fills, it's not all fill.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Oh, so I was just saying that for these building locations, each one is having fill, so it sits up higher. So that fill is actually displacing what stormwater is being held in place. So just saying.
So are there any members of the public who'd like to provide testimony tonight? So for the record, we're going to identify as Alan Morse. Was it 10 Meadow Lane? What number?
18.
18 Meadow Lane. Okay.
The author of the letter.
Sure. Why couldn't you say? I don't know. I asked to address the chair.
So I never want to tell, I never want to tell anybody they can't participate.
Say it again?
I never want to tell anyone they can't participate.
Well, I'm not the property owner, but I live there.
That's okay. You
So
can
can I-
participate.
Okay.
We just need your mailing address. so we
Oh,
can-
18A Meadow Lane, Underhill.
Okay.
Lane count. I live on Meadow Lane. I just wanted to comment on some of the excellent feedback because I have felt the same way as you, Penny, in reading that map that was first done by the Civil Engineering Associates, that I thought in layman's terms that it also meant that that flooding was still going to occur all the way down there. And it certainly made me wonder about the cemetery. But some of my concerns are that, we keep talking about 10-year and 25-year storms. Have there been studies for 100-year storms? Is there a requirement, or what's the minimum that has to be studied? Because as we keep seeing these extreme storm events, we're seeing more, it keeps getting worse. That flooding event is a yearly thing to different extremes, depending on obviously the weather and everything, but I can tell you that field floods every year. My question about and I'm sorry, I don't have the right, what is this thing called again? Detention basin. The detention basin. I think what I got out of that was that the homeowners are going to be responsible for making sure that it's inspected yearly. Am I correct on that? Okay. Thank you. So what if they don't? I don't know about the association that is going to be formed by this community. How active are they going to be? How responsible are they going to be? If they don't do it, who's going to? And what will happen if it's not? Is it just going to fail? What if it fails? And if it's not maintained or being proactively reviewed, what happens? Who's responsible for it? What are the repercussions? What exactly were you suggesting, Penny, when you were talking about an alternative for climate change and help with flooding? I feel like you didn't actually quite get to your point of what you were.
I was just wondering if the greater water issues in that area could somehow be solved on that site, though that would be burdensome to the applicant to have to do that. I wondered if there were some way, maybe it couldn't be solved, but maybe it could be mitigated in some ways. I'm not a civil engineer and I don't know how. In my mind's eye, it would be make a big ice skating rink, but that wouldn't solve the problem at all. But I just wondered if it could become part of the solution, if the applicant would be willing, if the town would be interested. I don't know what it would be.
Oh, believe me, things like that have occurred to me too. So I think some of those common sense solutions are things that can be valued too. So I just wanted more input on what you were thinking. I guess if I may say so, I certainly appreciate what you all are doing, but I also feel like it's being forced, if I may voice my opinion. I feel like instead of, I appreciate though that you're really looking into the exact, basically, geography behind this and the stormwater management. But I also feel like at this point in time, it feels like, how can we make this happen instead of, is this the best thing for this land? Can this land actually sustain this? Is it something that is sensible for people that are going to live there? So those are just some thoughts I had that I wanted to share. Thank you.
Anyone else like to participate tonight that's present here? So if there's anyone online who'd like to participate, we can recognize you now.
Carol, you had something to comment. Do you want to say it out loud?
Sure. I agree with the former person.
Can we get your name and address, please?
I live at 7 Mins Lane. Carol
So
McGoffin.
Carol, what's your last name?
McGoffin.
I didn't hear that, did you?
McLaughlin, yes.
Magoffin.
Go ahead.
Well, I agree with what the other person was saying, and that this is being forced upon us. I think I still don't understand why this was picked as an area, because it floods so much. To me, it makes no sense to have people who would be getting a new home who are of limited means to be stuck with a place that floods all the time. And I don't understand why the town doesn't have to vote on this. That's just my opinion.
Anything else? Would anyone else online like to participate? We'll give you an opportunity to redirect if you'd like.
No, I'll answer some of the questions that Lynn had coming through there. So as far as the storms that were required to be studied, for the state level, we look at a 10-year storm. For the town, it's a 25-year. So those are the two storms that we based our analysis on. There are some thresholds where a larger storm does need to be addressed, but it's not until you hit 10 acres of impervious surface. So this one is under an acre and therefore doesn't need the 100-year storm analysis at the state level. As far as the detention basin being inspected every year, that is a requirement of the homeowners. If that doesn't happen, then they're in violation of their state-issued stormwater permit because they're not performing that inspection or getting the annual maintenance done. So that becomes a title flaw in the property. Nothing in the development can be sold, and the state can issue a notice of violation if they're consistently not submitting those reports. And then every 5 years, an engineer actually has to go out to inspect as part of the stormwater permit renewal process. So it's not just the homeowners there. Every 5 years, a professional engineer needs to go out to perform that inspection. I think that's what I had.
But not 5-year inspection. So everyone's talking about.
You should come.
Even the again, Lynn Kemp, 18 Meadow Lane, Underhill. Even that 5-year inspection, does that also have to be the responsibility of the homeowners to make that happen?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And if that doesn't happen, like that's what I'm interested in with the studies is that is what could happen to that land if it's not maintained and can't, what's the word I want? Yeah.
Function.
Function, yes, or do what it's supposed to do with the water.
I could just give you an example. So Min's Lane was delinquent on their inspections and reports. So as George alluded to, whenever there's a closing for property, attorneys are very thorough today. They're going to look for, and is this a 90-50 permit? So I just completed we have 2 stormwater permits that I'm responsible for, or the town is responsible for. One's on Mount Vista, the other's on Pine Ridge. So I go through these processes all the time, and I deal with the state a lot for other reporting. And believe me, if you're a minute late, they're sending you an alleged notice of violation. And it's certified mail, and it's pretty scary when you get it. So if you pass that 5-year mark of renewing your permit, you're pretty much in big trouble at that point.
So each homeowner gets a letter and then it's there.
Well, no, the association gets the letter. The state does not want to deal with individual landowners. They want to deal with the entity. But none of these properties, like if you wanted to refinance, if you wanted to sell or whatever, the attorney comes in, finds this permits in neglect, and it'll get fixed quickly. So that's just the experience I have
Okay,
with this type of permit.
thank you.
Anything else you'd like to add, George?
I believe I'm good, thank you.
Brad, anything else you'd like to add? Any additional questions from members on the board? Come on. Okay.
Okay, it's Penny Miller. Brad, have you been told, given a time that the CEA would be able to write a report on George's responses and what they think about that is, did they give you a time frame for that? For
No.
that review?
And it depends on, if you have other questions for them. They did point out a few things. What happened to that piece of paper we had? There are a few things that I could share with George, but basically just some certain things that appear on one plan but not on another. And but they could certainly dive into it as much as we would like them to. So I guess they're looking for guidance from the DRB to, so basically to answer your question, I wouldn't consider this feedback. This is just a brief email I got. They had a few seconds to look at the plan and just noted some things. And obviously they did point out to me that storage area is important, stormwater or flood inundation storage area. The more storage area, the better. It leads me to believe that maybe, I think back to Steve DiTilio, who's the owner of KAS Engineering, who did the environmental review for the church or for Harvest Crossing, and he's a floodplain expert. He's done modeling on the Roaring Brook. Perhaps, the board might want to, not necessarily for us, but maybe encourage the applicant to seek out some expert floodplain advice and how it might interact, or how the seasonal flooding might interact with the proposed development. But just to be clear, we're not in a floodplain here either, but it's evident that, well, I'm not sure if I'm not disputing because you live there, but I'm not sure if every year is quite accurate, but there is obviously some level of flooding, but whether it's at that large level of flooding every year, I don't think so, but it does happen. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. So anyway, Penny, I didn't answer your question probably at all. I'm not sure. I would have to ask them how much time they need.
Can you pull up the drawing again? I have a question for George. So comparing your pre-development analysis with your post-development analysis, where is the study point?
The study point is the outlet of the proposed detention structure.
Right there?
Right here.
Right. And so in your pre-development analysis, you have 2.68 CFS going through the property somewhere. Where does it go?
The same point. So this is this kind of dark hatched line is our subcatchment that we're putting, so that's at this point right here.
Yep. But where does it go? Pre-development, where does it go? You got you came up with a number of 2.
The class 3 wetland area.
Yeah, 2.68 cubic feet per second is going into class 3 wetland.
Yep. That's our receiving water is the wetland.
Which is smaller than your detention basin right now, right? If I'm
Correct.
looking at it. And so where does it, so what you're saying is it goes in there and it doesn't go anywhere else?
No, it goes in there, it continue at this 702 contour that
Yeah.
we're showing through here. This is our wetland meadow, so it
Yeah.
remains in this low point in the middle of the property during those storm events.
All right, and then post-development, you've got 0.16 CFS coming out of the detention basin. And that's, you're maintaining, you're testifying it goes to the same place.
That's what our intent is.
So your intent is what, or that's what your design says. That's where it
Yep.
goes. Okay. Matt?
Yeah, I had a question for Brad. I wasn't paying too much attention, I guess, to the buyout for that property at Roaring Brook. If that were to happen, is there a way, how would that alleviate, or what could be done to alleviate the flow then into this property? Has that been looked at very carefully?
Yeah, there's nothing really you can do. You know, stream alteration's not possible there. There's no mitigation. The only, you know, there's been some talk about deploying some of these inflatable type dams they have in Canada, which they've had a lot of success with. So if you pictured this lot was wide open and you're out of the floodplain, if it did start to break, there's this big be deployed and the water fills up this bladder and makes like a storage area, and it could, and that area of Dumas Road could be a floodplain, a little bit of a floodplain, and perhaps keep it from breaching south.
But that's not a for sure, or that's...
Yeah, we're in the process of working on it. It's really not germane to this application at all. I was just kind of pointing out that's the distance that this water comes from. I guess what would be curious to know would be, based off that photo, if you could tell what contour that water was at. It'd be kind of interesting to know. I was trying to guess the contour, and if you just, I don't know, we don't have to pull the photo back up again, but since you're saying it was taken from such a long ways back, we're not really seeing the area clearly where the development's being proposed, right? We just see, my point was the high ground's on the right, evident, lots of high ground. And perhaps there's high ground where the houses are on the left of the, or on the west of the development road, but it just seems like seeking the high ground would be a smart thing to do.
I have a question for Charlie.
Yes, ma'am.
You have told us in the past that it is not our purview to design a project. We look at what's presented to us and we make our assessment based on what is presented to us. George is hired by the applicant, and it is not probably within his purview to spend money to do 100-year storm analysis or to move buildings or decide instead of 8 residences, maybe 6 would burden the property less. He's really responding to, I'm sure, his marching orders from his client. So what would, if say perhaps it might make sense that the buildings to the east would shove higher onto higher ground at the east, and the buildings to the west would go closer to those buildings, so that project, if that shifted more, it might work better water-wise. Who would intercede and ask that that be done? That's a design issue that we're not tasked with, nor would the applicant or George just proactively do that, spending his applicant's money. So how would a better design come out of this process? how could a better design come out of it, if there is a better design? I mean, just for example.
Well, you would articulate your concern like you just did. I may not agree with that, right? Nor, I don't know if the two other board members do either, right? So, you can say, well, I'd like to see the things over here, moved over here. You're allowed,
That's not typically what we would do, though. We don't usually design a project.
No, we don't. Would you approve this project if the question you have to ask yourself is, I don't like where the buildings are located. Would I approve this if the buildings were located over here? So we're allowed to approve, modify and approve, or deny. So that would be like one of those modify and approved routes.
Okay.
Right? But if the buildings were moved further east, opening up this area on the west side, is that what you're saying?
Well, it was just, and I don't know that, it makes sense to me, but I don't know that that would solve any problems. Brad had that thought. He brought it up a little while back.
So our criteria is pretty straightforward. It's approve, modify and approve, or deny. And that modify and approve usually comes down to conditions, right? Conditions of approval. All right. This is preliminary plat. In theory, we've got one more crack at the application or one more look at it. But if you don't like something, I'm not entirely convinced the stormwater management plan is going to pass muster.
With the state, you mean, or?
With me, I don't believe it.
Oh,
Right?
well, you're a civil engineer, so you have more experience.
I'm not a civil engineer, but
You have been.
I have been a civil engineer, but I'm not buying it, right?
Could we ask the church committee, a member who's here, if there's a consideration of fewer units, or does that not work out in the big picture?
What's your grounds for fewer units?
Well, if in fact it could only support 4 or 5, maybe 6 units farther to the east.
Yeah.
Maybe you can't get 8 units farther up and still have the required acreage and setbacks from the wetlands. Maybe you could only get fewer units. We don't know that 8 is the magic number for it to all work for Habitat or whoever's taking over.
Right.
So maybe someone could tell us that.
Yeah.
My name's Dan Mans, Pleasant Valley Road. I'm a member of the church and one of the people on the planning committee for Harvest Crossing. I can't answer your question. We would need to go back and talk that through with a larger group than me. But I can tell you how we got here, to this design, which is, I think, the church sees a pressing, not sort of need, a really urgent crisis with affordable housing, both in Underhill and the state of Vermont, and I would say to some extent nationally as well. And I think we feel called to try and address that here in this town. It's consistent with the town plan. It's consistent with housing study that's been done in Underhill. I don't think the need for affordable housing is really arguable at this point, in my estimation. We need it. We need it. We need a lot of it. And this is probably a drop in the bucket of what is needed. When we engaged George with this project, our instruction was, get us as many units in here as the land can support. The zoning and the septic systems and the infrastructure that's going to be required, we want to get as many houses on here as we can. We think this design was a decent starting point effort to use the best piece of this property, the least likely to flood, the highest ground property, to get the most units in that could be built. And I think that was sort of our starting point on this. So could we lose houses? Sure, we could lose houses. Does that make the project less effective? Yeah, I mean, I think it makes the project less effective. This is not an inexpensive operation. I mean, we've written tons of grants. We've raised a fair amount of money. Many people in the community have given money to this effort. And I think every time we take a unit out, that comes at a huge cost in terms of the ultimate goal of providing affordable housing in this community and meeting the need. So I can't say yes, I can't say no. Obviously, if we're a church, we don't want to build houses that are going to flood. I mean, that would be silly from our church's perspective. We want this thing to work, you know. And secondly, we want to be good neighbors, you know. We don't want water from this site to become a problem for adjacent property owners. You know, that doesn't meet our criteria either. I think broadly, this property, the configuration with the wetlands, it's a huge gift. It takes a lot of water away from other properties. You saw that picture from Harvest Run of the water running onto this property. You know, my understanding of what the engineering requirements for this is for the construction of this project, for it to be able to handle the storm water from this property on site. I think what George has designed, my understanding, I'm not an engineer, I don't play one on TV, but I think we're handling water from this project. I think the problem is water coming onto this property from surrounding areas. That's what the issue is, you know? And so how much of the water from surrounding areas that drains onto this property, how much are we going to have to deal with is really the question, you know? And I think it gets back to your holistic question, you know? I mean, look at the property up on Harvest Run. You know, that water's coming down the hill, goes into that ditch. That's supposedly where it's supposed to flow off. Guess what? Sometimes it doesn't. It overflows. It comes back onto this property, and it historically is getting absorbed into these wetlands, you know. Similar thing from Meadow Lane, you know. I mean, the property out of Roaring Brook and Lower Meadow Lane kind of, you know, is meandering along the backside and ultimately ending up in this property. So, yeah, the question is, you know, as much as how can we make this work? How many houses can we get into this? You know, how can we be good neighbors, not cause a problem to, you know, surrounding property owners, but also, you know, how much water are we supposed to be responsible for coming in from other areas? Long way to answer your question there, sorry.
Well, that's a good overview, Dan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I think we're seeing water come from Roaring Brook, as you said, through that property. So there's that water, and then the water off Harvest Lane spilling over into this property. So theoretically, maybe the stormwater plan takes care of what's falling and landing on this property, but I don't know how we take care of other properties all around it.
And the further challenge, I think, I presume it's a challenge of taking care of that when the ground is frozen.
You can leave that on. I think I know the answer to this question, but does the board feel they have enough information at this time to make a decision? Would you like to discuss this information, this application in open or closed session?
I don't feel I have enough information to make this decision right now, but I'm not exactly certain who I would suggest we tap into. One thing is I would like to see what CEA has to say about the redesign because I don't know anything about civil engineering. And then I think the issues brought up about water coming onto the site are very real. I don't know if that's something that George feels is within his skill set or purview to deal with, or if that might be someone, say, a floodplain person, or someone could advise us on this issue of water coming onto the site, which is so much more vague, I would think, than designing a stormwater system for the development on the site. So I don't know how that would even get assessed. But I feel like I need more understanding of that. And I'm very sorry to hold up the progress on this, but I feel like I cannot, I need more information somehow, or I need it to make more sense to me.
So what I think I'm hearing is you'd like to see CEA's review of George's response.
I would like, at the very least, that,
Yeah.
yes.
Our next hearing would be the 16th of September, I think.
Yeah, right. The first Monday is Labor Day, obviously, and
Yeah.
the third is the 16th. But
So it's like
given the Labor Day,
2 weeks away,
yeah,
right?
but given the Labor Day week, where some people take time off.
Well, you've talked to Michael Koch, the staff engineer from CEA.
Yeah.
How much time does he need to give us a review of George's response? You think you can get some out of him?
I think the 23rd might be a safer bet, which is the following Monday. But
So we would do a special meeting on the 23rd.
just buys you a little bit more time.
You guys okay with continuing the hearing to the 23rd? Are you going to be around?
On the 23rd, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're committed. We're all committed now to the 23rd.
I'm back on the 13th or 14th, so it should be.
If you're not going to be around, we got to figure out when to continue the hearing.
Yeah, I'll be around.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is, I need a motion. Do you have a question?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm kind of curious on maybe more than what Penny is curious about getting information on.
Yeah.
I think it would be nice to understand what the 100-year flood analysis does to this property and what's underwater at that flow.
So you like more information from the applicant?
Yeah.
On the 100-year flood?
Yeah.
Running it through the pond, same thing, right? Same.
Well, geez, I don't know. I mean, I guess it, if that's when the ditch overflows, then it has to be more than just having to do with this property.
Right.
Because there will be water back feeding onto the property.
Right.
Which is, I think, what a big concern.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Is
Is it possible to analyze water on a property when it's not generated from the property? I mean, when it's overflow from a ditch and
Yeah.
it is?
Yeah.
So Steve Diggler has already calculated the Roaring Brook modeling, the hex res modeling. and would know what a 100-year event would do.
Well, I think George can run it through his HydroCAD model and give us the same
Yeah, so
results.
I can't do HEC-RAS, but I can,
Yeah.
we have to make some assumptions because we can't obviously go out and map 400 acres of watershed.
I'm just saying he's done it already. So, and it's somebody that has worked for the church, but just a suggestion.
But that doesn't take into account the Meadow Lane,
You could.
right? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we were provided with earlier analysis of Meadow Lane, of the waters going into that. Well, we keep calling it a ditch, but it's a blue line stream. And so I think some of it's already been done, but I guess I'm asking for it at a 100-year.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure George can do that. George, I don't want to speak for you, but
Yes, there should be, I can do something. We'll
Yeah,
see if it-
But not at the level, like if you were going to try to do a letter of map amendment or something like that.
we're not asking to generate a floodplain map, though.
Okay, I guess I misunderstood.
Yeah.
So
You just want to see the impact, what the pre.
the impact on the site.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and I guess I just got some new information this evening, which really appreciate that there's catch basins along Park Street that feed into the
same ditch.
The ditch.
Yeah, the ditch.
Well, I guess
The Park Street ditch.
I really don't want to say
The
ditch,
stream,
but
yeah.
you got me going on it. So yeah, Park Street is flowing into that now. Well, or always has been, but it wasn't in that previous analysis done on the capacity of those culverts to convey the stormwater.
Or was it?
So you're asking for an expanded analysis to
Well,
Park Street or just the runoff?
We got
from
an
it?
analysis of the capacity of the culverts
Yeah.
to convey stormwater.
Yeah.
And I don't believe, I don't know if you know off the top of your head, I don't recall that Park Street catch basins and stormwater were included in
I
that.
would have to look and refresh my memory
In
there,
that
yeah, I
flow.
don't recall. Yeah, I do know what we were proposing is that none of our stormwater is leaving the site, so those are
Yeah.
noted problem issues, and they probably cannot convey the 100-year storm. But we're not making that problem any worse with the proposed development we're doing on our site. It's kind of the gist of what that modeling was trying to show. Is that yes, these culverts are, the ditches are flat, the culverts are undersized, but we're not contributing to what is a known stormwater issue and making it any worse.
Yeah, and I agree with that. What I'm pointing out is that there's also additional waters that flow into that I don't believe were included. And if they were, I apologize for misrepresenting that. But the info that I'm interested in is at what point is that ditch going to back up onto this property?
So George, just simplify for me, the 100-year storm calculations are what happens on the site with the development with a really big storm. So that's taking it to the next level. And then also you're looking at how the site is inundated. Now, Dan is asking how the site is inundated with other water in a 100-year storm. Is that it? So what the development does in a 100-year storm, and then in addition, what comes onto the site in a 100-year storm. Is that what we're asking you to do, more or less?
That's my understanding of what you're asking for.
Okay. How big an ask is that, by the way?
It's not a small task. but
Let's
it's doable.
let's refine it a little bit better so that you're not wondering how long the piece of string is.
Yep.
The culvert that is on Park Street with the stone head wall that Brad said floated out of the ground in 2011. We want to see the impact of that on a 100-year storm.
I mean, again, I can show that, but I don't believe that, we'll see. My guess is that it's not going to be able to
Handle that, yeah.
but that our project isn't going to make it any worse.
Right.
Is that, so I just have to show you that.
But Dan wants to see the 100-year numbers.
Yep.
I think what Dan's asking though is more of a floodplain.
Yeah, what I was
Analysis.
what Dan wanted to know was what point does it backflow into the property,
Right.
like in the picture that was showing, which is different than the Park Street culvert analysis.
But it's all
Yeah.
constrained by the same culvert, right?
So it's
If
a
you can't get
culvert.
off the site or can't get out of the ditch, it's going to back up somewhere.
But no, it's a different, analyzing the culvert and saying, no, it's not big enough is easy. Figuring out how much water is going to fill up in the field during a 100-year storm is difficult.
And that's what we're.
Is that what you want to know?
Well, I'd like to have some assurances that this infrastructure that we're approving and I would love to see happen isn't going to be impacted if we get a 100-year storm in 7 years or in 20 years, because I think this project's valuable and it should last much longer than that. And before the homeowners have to make substantial investments.
Understood, and it's typically, it's always possible to make these developments withstand 100-year, 500-year storms. It's not cost effective, so if we're trying to do a affordable housing community, but you have to put $500,000 into stormwater infrastructure, it can't be an affordable housing project anymore. So it's always possible to make this work. It's just at what point does the project no longer become feasible because the amount of infrastructure you need is not supportable by what the end goals of the project are.
And maybe, I think my question was, could an angle on that be that the town put some investment into that to be solving a town problem? Oh, it's all
Why don't you
our,
run that down for me?
it's all our tax dollars,
Yeah.
of course, right?
I-
Funding,
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if anybody here knows the answer to that, or the select board knows the answer to that. Yeah. So you want to make the applicant figure it out?
I don't know. That's.
Come on, you're being a hard ass. Come on.
I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah,
That's the
well-
problem.
Yeah, so we've asked the applicant to review the stormwater management on his parcel. He's demonstrated to us 95% of the way there that any stormwater that hits his parcel is going to stay there. What we've heard testimony from other people is that there's an existing problem. And what are we doing about it? Are we going to hold this project hostage about it?
Well, there are two aspects to it. There's an existing problem, and maybe we do want to hold this project hostage since it's the last flat area in a flood situation. Maybe it's our last gasp to be able to hold it. But then the other problem is, that I think Dan is pointing out, is it's not only that other properties have a problem, but they could have enough of a problem that it then comes back onto this site. So is there enough of a problem, and then it impacts this site? So now we've got, say, 5 neighbors with a problem. Now we've got 12 neighbors with a problem.
When we approved, and I think you were on the board when we did it, we approved the Harvest Run extension
Oh, yes.
and Jacobs Hill Road and Mims Lane. We required them to manage the stormwater infrastructure along Harvest Run. It's obvious from the photos that's not being done. So we can direct our interim zoning administrator to issue a notice of violation to get them to clean up the ditch. It may alleviate an immediate problem, but it may not be the long-term solution you're looking for. So I'm going to ask the board to ask for continuance. I don't know if we've clearly articulated what we're looking for, George. But we do want to see what a 100-year flood event would do. Right?
Well, I would.
You would.
I'm only
Yeah, well, you would.
one out of.
Penny wants to see a response from CEA. on the letter. So I'd entertain a motion. Just when I say the letter, I mean George's response of 19 August. And so what I'd entertain a motion is continue the hearing till 6:30 on September 23rd.
I'll make a motion to continue this hearing to the 23rd
Yeah,
of September.
6:30
6:30.
PM. Public comment at 6:25.
I'll second that.
All right, is there any discussion on the motion? Everybody can make that date, right?
Yes.
Because we're here until the end, until a decision is made. So we're going to continue the hearing until Monday night, September 23rd, 6:30. You'll be up here in the town hall. And we'd be anxious to see information before then, George.
Yes, I'll try to give you
Okay.
enough time to review
Yeah.
before that hearing on the 23rd.
Yeah.
But also George needs to see if there are any remarks about his, I mean, it's a kind of a circular thing. CEA needs to come back with some information possibly that George might need to respond to by that time. Okay.
Do we know, everybody know what we're asking for?
I believe so.
You guys good?
I wonder if we could ask the church committee to discuss what they can live with in terms of numbers of, I mean, if we decide, only 4 or 5 units can fit on high and dry on this, does that mean that we continue to work on it, or you continue to work on it?
I think he's indicated he wants 8 units, 9 lots.
Well, he
Right.
did only because that you wanted the most that you could get out of those.
Yeah,
But if
we certainly can discuss it. At some point, the project becomes unfeasible, I think, if, I mean, go to the extreme. We can only put 1 house in there. Well, guess what? It's going to be very difficult to put an affordable house in there for, so when do we cross that?
Yeah, is it 6 maybe? I mean, just to get an idea if.
I mean, we can certainly look at that. I want to go back to what you're asking George to do, because, A, we're going to end up paying George for this, and B, I'm a little unclear on, are you asking George to do the analysis of a 100-year storm if all existing surrounding infrastructure were working the way it's supposed to? Because I don't believe that's really true today. I think the ditch hasn't been maintained. The culvert's probably clogged up. I think if you dump a 100-year storm in there, guess what? The water's going to back up, But if all of that stuff was working the way it was supposed to be, there might be a lot less impact on this property. So what are you looking for? Because, 100-year, only considering the water that falls on this property, because I don't think that's going to be the only water on the property, you see. So you got to get clear, I think, on what you're asking, because I didn't understand. I don't know how to go back and tell our committee what you guys asked George to do.
If I can add one thing that.
Well, let's let Dan answer a question first.
Yeah, well, I think it has to be an analysis with everything working properly, because I suppose we could do the analysis with everything working properly and then take away some of the capacity based on insufficient maintenance. I haven't been in Underhill that long. I've been on the DRB for most of the time I've been in Underhill, and we've talked about this ditch for about 4 different occurrences.
Right.
It would certainly be wonderful if there was some mechanism that included maintaining the flow of water so that the number of properties that are impacted every time it backs up aren't impacted.
Right. I think we would agree with that, because I think some of what people, some of the correspondence that I've seen about this project, what people are worrying about is times when the ditch is overflowing, the property is getting flooded, and then guess what? It's going to some of the surrounding properties on Park Street. But I don't think that's water that originated necessarily from our property. And had the existing approved infrastructure for stormwater runoff from up on the hill function the way it was supposed to, I'm not sure we would have been having problems with anything spilling over from this property.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there also is a lot of water that comes down that is conveyed into the ditch from that Meadow Lane culvert.
Right.
And to show how long I've been in Underhill, I think the town did some work on the catch basins on Park Street 5 or 6 years ago, right about when I moved into town.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they improved the flow into that long culvert that, was infrastructure that floated up out of the ground in 2011.
Right. Right.
It's,
I mean,
it's a complex issue.
It is complicated.
I think back, you asked a pointed question, and my response is that I think George's analysis has to be with it working, functioning properly. He mentioned tonight that he doesn't think those culverts can convey 100-year flood.
Right.
So I think it's going to show that. I don't think that we need to, discount the capacity of any of the infrastructure to convey 100-year flood, because it can't.
Right.
And it's going to show that.
Right.
And I hope that it doesn't back up to the point of impacting the infrastructure that's proposed, but I don't know.
Right.
And Dan, just to clarify, I think Dan ended up summarizing it beautifully, but I just want to clarify one point. I think I'm correct on this, that the culvert that is the culprit is not blocked. It's that it is only a certain size, because it can only be a certain size, and it can't go any lower, or it would be below the level of the Browns River. So it is here, and it can only hold so much.
Right.
And that's what everything backs up to. And maybe the ditches haven't been maintained, or maybe some of the swales haven't been maintained, but there is a limitation. I think that is a physical limitation, not a maintenance issue, is my understanding. And that's what Dan is asking George to look at. And I will just throw in the very ambiguous issue that I think cannot be solved, is that with climate change, it's when things are frozen and rain comes down. I think the best of stormwater venues or conveyances probably don't work anymore in any situation.
So we have a motion.
Thank you.
We have a motion to continue the hearing and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of continuing the hearing till the 23rd of September signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No one's opposed, motion carries. We'll look for your information in advance of the hearing, George. We'll look for your information in advance of the hearing.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
Brad, do we have any other business to attend to?
But not for the camera.
Not for the camera, okay.
And George, thank you very much for well-organized materials.
No problem.
Yeah, so we have, like to take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
8:37.
Second motion. All those, any discussion?
Aye.
No discussion. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn.
8:37.